What's going on, folks? Brian here with Blackfin Coffee, and today I'm going to be roasting a brand new bean straight from Congo. You can go to our website. Our brand new relaunched website is now shopblackfin.coffee, and you can see right here the Congo bean ready to go. So we're gonna go ahead and get fired up, warm up our roaster. It's like a NASA pre-launch simulation. And here we go. We'll go ahead and scoop some beans. There it is, that beautiful bean right there. So one thing about this bean, just to note, it is organic option. And I'm gonna start by roasting 1 pound, that's about 1 pound, this jar right here, of this bean, probably to right about first crack. And then I'm gonna roast another bean to our dark specification, which is right about second crack. I'm excited about this bean, guys. This one is from Congo, as I said. And why I'm excited about it is it comes from the Lake Kivu region, and this one has body that's like medium to full body, that's similar to Rwanda. Rwanda beans are grown and harvested at the same Lake Kivu, and so that bean has a nice smooth finish. Rwanda is known for just having a nice buttery body. It's delicious. And it's also similar to Ethiopia in the sense that is grown with some volcanic soil at a higher altitude, more inland in Africa. And it's gonna have some notes of raspberry and blueberry and dark chocolate. I have a very good feeling that this is going to be the most delightful dark roast coffee I've ever tasted. And so we're going to go through that together today. Alright, we're warmed up well enough. I'm going to put this up. It goes in there. Hot air coming out right now. You can see the element. Grab my beans. Throw them in. You see they started to fly away a little bit. Set my log. Gonna roast this to first crack. Now, when I roast to first crack, I like to go all the way right to the end of first crack, personally. I'd love to hear anybody else. If you roast coffee, let me know what you think. I'm roasting coffee in a 3-pound small batch fluid bed roaster. And fluid bed, as you see, all it means is that the beans are popping up and down and the air is forcing its way from the bottom, this little guy right here, all the way up. And that right there, that's called a loft. I like to keep it no higher than here so the beans don't jump out. We're trying to save the beans as much as possible because we want to grind them and drink them. Alright guys, and now I just sit and wait. I think you've seen me do this before, and I like being able to put these videos together for you guys just to see how the process works. If you ever have any questions about roasting coffee, please leave it in the comments here. Let me know. If you want to know something more specific about what I do regarding the process, I'm always more than happy to share with you guys. Entrepreneurs, we tend to want to give our information away, and why? Because we want to see everybody else succeed as well. So right now we're at 266 degrees. First crack usually for this roaster comes at around 420 degrees for me. Really dependent on the bean. I mean, it depends on the humidity in the air around me. It depends on the temperature of the day. Like, I don't have very good temperature control in this room, which is why I like to fire up this roaster and get it nice and hot. and it does affect the way that the bean roasts. Another thing that affects it is moisture content. So I highly recommend anybody, if you're starting out roasting coffee, buy it from these guys, Coffee Crafters. You can go to www.coffeecraftersgreen, I think that's what it is, .com. And these guys are really great. Anyways, this is the Congo bean we're talking about. And on here, I hope it's not too blurry so you can see, we've got, it tells you the information, the region, the elevation, the harvest, the altitude, the moisture content. This one is 11.4%. The cup score, that's a Q grade. This one's an 84 point. And then it tells you the description, what you're going to expect as far as body, acidity, and notes. So this one has a sweet acidity, which typically just means it's a higher acidity. A lot of people think they want their coffee without acidity, and that's fine. I mean, everybody's got their own preferences, and you can get less acidic coffee. Every coffee bean has some kind of acidity level to it, though, so don't be scared away if you know, by acidity. Some are more acidic than others. I think that, in my experience, higher acidity coffees just means brighter, more beautiful flavor. So when you get less acidic coffee, you tend to get more body and more earthy flavors in that coffee bean, rather than, you know, the notes of like fruits and, you know, caramel and chocolate and all of these other notes. You tend to lose that with less acidic coffees. This one has got a sweet acidity. I think that usually it's just translation for a higher acidity. It's gonna taste wonderful though, and I'll tell you why, even though I've never tasted it. Not only the body and the notes excite me, but it's organic. Organic coffee is always the best tasting coffee, no matter what. So mixing, you know, those notes and that body with, and it's organic, I think this is going to be a great cup of coffee. Alright, let's show you how this roast is going. As you can see, we're at 383 degrees. That has slipped down some, that's normal. Our roaster is at 523.24. Our loft is looking good. I like to sometimes do what some roasters do, which is kind of check the bean. This one's roasting along really well. Yep, we're coming close to first crack. Should be cracking in another 20 or 30 degrees or so. First crack, if you don't know, is simply a marker that roasters like to use in order to describe the roast level of the bean. You can see some chaff is flying out right now. That's what this is for. It's designed to suck the air through here and into a chaff bag that goes inside of here. You can probably see it. So this bean is coming along really nicely. Yep, there's a crack right there. So 400 degrees. This one's cracking a little earlier than usual, which is okay. We'll see how long this crack goes. So that first crack happens when the bean reaches a temperature that causes the bean to expand, and basically it's like a mini explosion. So remember how I mentioned the moisture content earlier? Well, every bean has a moisture content, and as I said, this one is 11.4%. It's a little higher than some others that I roast, and all it is water inside the greens. Now, these beans were dried before it was packaged, and that is usually done in a multitude of different ways, but usually what happens is they take it and they set it over a patio of some kind and they allow it to dry in the sun. Usually, that's how that works. And once it's fully dry, they scoop it all up and they put them in bags, in burlap bags. Mine is in a plastic bag because basically I go through a vendor that gets the burlap bags and then sorts them into smaller batches so that when they ship them out to someone like me, they can charge a little more money because they did the work, but I don't have to pay, you know, $500 for a bag of coffee. This wouldn't have been $500, but would have been up there. Anyways, so here we are. I think first crack is over. Take a look at these beans. I'm a little skeptical because we're at 412 degrees. That's early, usually, for me. But I think we're going to go ahead and throw it. Alright. Dumping it into my cooling tray at 415 degrees. I'm going to leave the roaster running because we're going to do another batch. And we're going to roast the next one to a dark level. But take a look at these beautiful beans right now. Nice color. It's got a golden brown color. This one looks slightly darker than it really is. And again, we go by first crack when we're trying to decide, you know, whether it's a light or whatever. Light, medium, dark. Light roast is first crack. Anything before first crack is technically considered a blonde roast, and that's a popular option these days. Again, just take a look at those beans. The lighting in here doesn't exactly do justice, but yeah, I like it. I'm happy with it. Alright, next up, we're going to do it dark. Get my handy dandy measuring tool. I've washed this, by the way, for anybody who's skeptical. I promise it's clean. Alright. Roughly 1 pound, sometimes less. Doesn't really matter. My roaster does best from 1 pound to 3 pounds of greens. Alright. We're at 527. It's a great temperature. Inside the hopper is still hot. We're going to pull that down pretty fast. Here we go. Set my loft. There we go. Alright. That's a good loft. Look at that. Temperature dropped down, like I said. About 175 right now. If the coffee isn't roasting at the proper speed, the proper rate, then you can roast it too fast and then end up with a lot of underdeveloped looking coffee beans with some other great looking coffee beans, and that's nobody wants that. You don't want to roast too fast. My setting is at about, this roaster has a numerical setting on this dial. I always roast either from 6 to 8 without fail every single time. I never go above 8, and I tend to roast 6 on my 1 pound batches. I'll roast, you know, if I do 1.5, I'll do 6.5. I do 2 pounds, I'll do 7. And so that all that really does is it controls how this temperature comes up here. Now, this temperature rises in correlation with this temperature. We don't want this ever to get above, 650 is really high. You know, 600 degrees is fine. I like to keep it between right here and about 600 when I'm roasting beans. And you can, in this roaster, you can almost roast every single bean exactly the same way and get a desirable outcome. Some beans like the higher temperatures more than others. Other beans, you know, you don't ever want to be higher than this temperature, and you kind of learn as you go. So I think we're cooled off. I'm going to go ahead and close this guy. All that is sucking the air to outside. You see my vent up there. There it is. This guy right here. Alright, and I'll go ahead and empty this tray out. We're not going to measure it because this is just a test run. go ahead and put this up in one of these bins right here. I labeled this one based off of a blend. Give me a second. I'm gonna grab my bin. This one. Continue to watch what I'm doing. We're at about 365 degrees right now. I'm gonna empty out some of that chaff. Chaff is harmless. It's just sometimes it sticks to the beans depending on the roast specification. Look at my trash can. Rest of it out of there. And relabel my bin. I do it with dry erase markers. Makes it easy. Why is it such a small bin? Well, I'm only doing about 3 pounds at a time. Other roasters are going to have much bigger bins that they have to put their coffee beans into because though they might call themselves small batch roasters, they're still capable of being able to roast 30 pounds at a time most times. So I'm just going to call this Congo, and I pulled it at 415 degrees. Again, that's lighter. That's cooler than most of the beans I pull. Right now, first crack, the coolest I usually get out of this roaster is about 420 degrees for my Columbia bean. So this one, to go all the way through first crack and to come out to 415 degrees, I'm actually impressed. I like that. I'm happy with that because what that means is I have more control of the roast of that bean, and that's something that every roaster wants to have. I have to rename this one Whiskey. Look, that one's been on there so long that it doesn't want to come off. Give it a little help. Like it's coming out to first crack now, but we're gonna let it go all the way to second crack. So I don't know exactly how hot that's gonna be, but my intuition tells me it'll be closer to 450, maybe 455. And when I pull these at second crack, I like to let it go. I like to basically let it just start cracking for maybe like half a minute to a minute. I don't ever let it go all the way to the end of second crack because then it begins to taste burnt and ashy and you start to lose the characteristics of what you really want in a dark roasted coffee. So so when I roast dark coffee, I always promise my customers that you're never gonna get burnt coffee from black bean because you can go to Starbucks if you want burnt coffee. I don't believe in it. You can still call it dark and it not be burnt. Now, so you're gonna hear that a lot from specialty roasters, artisan roasters, because the truth of the matter is, why bother going through the trouble of getting an 84-point Q graded coffee at a higher price, organic, and then burn it? It doesn't make sense. Honestly, if the reason why Starbucks serves you burnt coffee are 2 reasons. Number one, they want consistency across the board. They want it to taste the same every single time, and that's great. I love that. That's every roaster should strive for that. Absolutely. Some do it better than others. But number 2, they're also roasting coffee that's not specialty. Now, when I say that, you can get specialty coffee from Starbucks reserves, but you're not going to get it out of their Pike Place roast or their Vienna roast or their Sumatra, or not Sumatra, but like their French roast. none of those are going to be specialty coffees, and that's why they're burnt. And they may have a good control on their beans, and they may have a good process in which they are getting those greens to you, but it's still burnt. And the only way to control the flavor of lesser quality beans is to burn it. And that's, you're just trying to hide the characteristics that you don't want in a coffee bean. That's really all it comes down to. So it's my promise to never burn the beans. Alright, you can probably hear we're already through second crack, or first crack rather. We're at about 423 degrees. I don't know if you can see that, it's coming up nicely. I may end up roasting my lighter roast to 425 degrees. I can smell this one has a nice caramelized sugar smell. That's favorable, in my opinion, when it comes to coffee, because it's usually the point in which you still have some of the sweetness from the acidity and the notes of the fruits that you're going to taste, with a little bit of a caramelized sugar taste as well. That is my favorite. That's my sweet spot, usually when I roast coffee. Now, that's what happens with light through the dark. And when it's light, you get a lot of the more vibrant, acidic notes like the raspberry and the blueberries. And as it moves into the medium phase, which is where it's at right now, you start to lose some of that, and you start to get more of a caramelized flavor. And that's typical for a medium roast. You still get a little bit of those notes, and it's kind of like a balance. And then as you continue on, you start to get notes of, usually like chocolate notes when it gets darker. And then if you go too dark and you go off the spectrum, that's when it starts to just taste burnt. And you don't really get much of anything except for the body of that bean, which in this case might be nice anyways. I just prefer to have the balance of the body with the flavor of the notes. So we're at 445 degrees right now. I'm gonna have to leave the camera up here because I gotta grab this thing. I'm starting to hear second crack begin. The second crack is never as loud as the first crack. Roast gets lighter, so I have to turn this loft down as we go. Alright, the second crack is beginning to come out nicely. As I suspected, we're at 450 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it. We're going to put it in the cooling tray. Alright. Go ahead and shut my roaster down. My roaster has to go through a cool down cycle before I turn it off all the way. Let me show you these beautiful beans. Alright, now look at that. You can see it's visibly a lot darker. You can see some of these beans, like this one. You start to see a little bit of oily, the oils start to come out the darker that you roast the coffee. This one looks beautiful. I'm really happy with it. Compared to this one, you can kind of see the light-dark contrast. So this one's dark. Just back it up a little bit. And this one's light. Kind of hard to tell. Light, dark. This bean has a darker shade than a lot of beans when they're roasted at a lighter level. But that's okay. So now you can see we're going to cool the roaster down. This is air just coming up through here. The vacuum is going to continue to pull air. We have to cool the beans as rapidly as possible. Why? Because we want to trap as much of the CO2 in the bean as possible. Now, that's something that is, kind of comes down to the roaster, how they prefer to rest their beans. Essentially, this is the beginning of the resting process. So it's cooling. You want to get it cooled off to room temperature as soon as possible. Be able to trap as much of that CO2 in the bean as possible. And then some people prefer to let the beans rest for 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. It really comes down to that person's preference. I wanted to say just their control over the flavor of the beans. As far as I'm concerned, myself personally, I have no problems cooling the beans completely and then grinding them as soon as they're cool. Now, that being said, you're gonna lose a lot of CO2. Like when a bag gets packaged, it has a valve. That valve is designed to let air out. That smells so good still. I roasted this at the end of August, and that whiskey barrel-aged coffee still smells like heaven. And the air that's coming out is purely CO2. It's releasing from the beans. That's still bean coffee. And that's why you want to keep it in bean form, because you want to preserve the freshness as much as possible. You know, at the end of the day, you can put it in the fridge, like whatever, it'll keep it colder, longer, and that way the CO2 releases more slowly. That's okay, but you don't really need to. And most people, they're gonna drink the coffee within the next couple weeks after they buy it anyways. But I always recommend people to grind their beans right before they brew them. Right before you brew them, because you're gonna get the best flavor from those beans at that time. That being said, you can still order it ground. I understand a lot of people still buy ground coffee, but and I'll grind it for you right here. You can see I've got all these different settings ready to go, and happy to do that for you. I would say that you're just not going to get as much of the flavor of the coffee bean as you would if you ground it yourself. But yeah, guys, when you buy ground coffee at the grocery store, it's 3-6 months old, and by that point ground coffee goes stale really fast. And so whenever you order coffee, I cool it, and then I grind it, and then I package it right away, and it ships right out the door to you all over the country. You're gonna get it in a matter of a few days, and that's fine. You know, coffee will be great even if it's ground, but you always want to drink the coffee as soon as possible after it's ground for the best flavor. Alright guys, well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I think we're cooled off. I'm going to go ahead and try these beans out, and then I'm going to determine whether or not I'm going to roast to these specifications. I do this with every bean just because, number one, I want to taste good coffee, but number two, I want to make sure that you get the best quality roast whenever you order. I think you're going to love it. And I hope that you order the coffee. I hope that this video was informative. And until next time, guys, stay caffeinated.